Hello folks, hello ladies and gents, welcome to Wednesday Live Q&A. You'll notice if you saw last week, I tried a different location, didn't really work. I'm back in the Fender custom shop room. This feels to me like it's the home of the live Q&A. So I think this is where we're going to stay for now. I hope you guys are happy with that. I certainly am, and I hope it sounds better today as well. I'm only doing these videos on my phone, so it's very low tech. So there's often instances of disparity between the voice and the guitar that a lot of you talk about, but it's as best as I can make it, I'm afraid. Hopefully you can hear what I'm saying clearly and you can hear what I'm playing. That's the more important thing. So anyway, hope you're all doing well. Hope you've had a good week. Thank you for joining. I can see already there's quite a lot of people that are on board today, which is great. And hopefully you got enough notice this time, because I think last time I just rushed straight into it and a few of you said and commented afterwards and stuff, I just didn't know this was happening. So hopefully you got enough notice and here we are. So I've got a pretty good live Q&A, well rather cool gear segment of the live Q&A lined up today. I'm quite excited for this because I'm literally just going to show you stuff that's not only incredibly cool, but it's stuff that I happen to adore myself. So hopefully you're going to share that adoration with me. But as is usually the case with these videos, if you haven't seen these before, I show you cool gear, but I also want to answer as many of your questions as I can. So if you've got something that you want me to answer, specifically about the gear that we stock here, or anything you may have seen on the Peach channel recently, or anything really, chuck it in the live chat and I will get to answering it. I can see already, yeah, like I say, there's a few people tuning in already, so hello to Shane Marquis from Australia, 2 AM. What on earth are you doing, my friend? But glad to have you here anyway. Simon Dixon, hello. Stunning PRS, you say. What is it? I'll get to that in a little while. And also you say which wah. I'll get to that in a little while as well. David Gordon in California, 9 AM. Yeah, we do these things at 4 PM here in the UK. I try and make it as balanced across the board as possible. So, it's a decent time for our UK viewers. In the States, I appreciate that, particularly on the West Coast, you guys are probably just waking up, but here we go. We've got someone watching from California, so hopefully it's a decent time. Good to have you along anyway, David. And I won't repeat the second part of your comment there because it's illegal over here, but, good for you, man. I'm glad you're having a good time. Yeah, so a few other greetings. I'm going to get to all that stuff as we go, but as is usually the case. Oh, Gavin Penny from Reykjavik. Great to see you. You're a well-travelled man, my friend. Anyway, this is going to be a good one. I can feel it. So, let's delve into... I can see a few questions already, but let's delve into some cool gear because I can't resist any longer. This thing. Okay, so earlier this year, my hopes and dreams for PRS guitars were somewhat squandered by the fact that, if anyone has seen the channel before, you'll know this. This model, this PRS Special semi-hollow 22, was a limited run guitar. And when they were gone, and I've had an absolute intense love affair with these things. I just think that they're so interesting, they're so different to some of the other guitars that PRS makes. Not only being a semi-hollow instrument, because they've kind of caught up, you know, there's a few other semi-hollow and fully hollow PRS guitars in the line now, so it's not that. There's also this middle pickup, which again has been fitted to some other PRS guitars since, the modern Eagles, for example. I think that's where this guitar kind of got its origin anyway. And you know, it's got a standard PRS tremolo on it. So on paper at least, these guitars are fairly ordinary. However, every time I've played one, and I had the great fortune, I think it was last year now, of when we had so many of these things. I got to play all of them, and I loved every single one. So, I thought they were gone. Imagine my surprise when I came in earlier this week, and this had arrived, among some other very nice PRS listings as well. So it had some really nice custom 24s, which I was going to show you, but I don't know why this is here, but I'm not going to ask too many questions because I'm very glad that it is. But unfortunately, this is probably, I mean, I've said this before, but I can see this being the last one that we get for a very long time. And they happen to have knocked it out of the park with one of the best tops that these special models have ever had. Hopefully that's translating somewhat through YouTube, but... And then you play it, okay, so these make me play in a different way, very different way. I think having the middle pickup there, you could view it as an inconvenience, but I tend to view it as a little springboard, and I find that I play rhythmic little Grateful Dead Mayerisms much more deftly on this guitar than I do anything else. Hello to Jill Griffiths. So, as an example, I think the middle pickup is just a nice little bridge for your hand. Maybe it's just subconscious as well, but... And it also gives you the ability to be really, really dynamic, and that's something I talk about all the time. I love guitars that have this dynamic sensibility. I can demonstrate that by putting on an overdrive pedal. One of the overdrive pedals I got today is the Ryra 808. And to demonstrate it even further, I also had an envelope filter, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this guitar just does something that no other guitar I've ever played does. The closest thing that has that same kind of sensibility is something like a Gibson 335. You know, there's just something different about this, and I don't know what it is. I don't even care what it is, because it just works. And so when you're playing softly with an overdrive pedal on, and so in true PRS fashion, it can kind of handle anything that you throw at it, and that's all you can ask for, I think, in an electric guitar. So, you know, I've talked a lot about the Special before. I was just surprised more than anything to see it, and did the listening video for it, and playing it today. There's just something truly special about these guitars. That's all I'm going to say. So anyway, that's Cool Gear piece number 1. And I am going to keep hold of this guitar for a little bit longer, but I want to make sure I answer your questions. So let me skim through here and see what we got today. Okay. Rob Brady says, a better balance to the sound this week. That's good to know. Thank you for letting me know that, Rob. I appreciate it. I hope it's the same for all you guys. Okay. Stanislav Migra, hope I've pronounced that correctly, says, hello Jack, quick question. Carbon copy versus the Aquapus for short delays. Funnily enough, I went through that question very, very meticulously myself a few years ago, because for the longest time when I was younger, the carbon copy from MXR was my only effect that I used. I had overdrive pedals and fuzzes and stuff, and the kind of gigs I was playing at the time didn't warrant a load of effects. I didn't really have an understanding of effects. So I just bought a delay pedal, and I liked the premise of the carbon copy. It seemed to be like a, you know, fairly blanket, all across the board, good sounding delay. Everyone seemed to think that. So I bought that, but I also really liked the Aquapus because back in the good old days of YouTube, before it exploded into a million different avenues like it is now, there was really only Pro Guitar Shop and Pro Guitar Shop, and probably Pro Guitar Shop for pedal demos that were any good anyway, in my opinion. So Andy was the king, and he always made pedals sound great, still does. And I loved the sound that he got out of the carbon copy and an Aquapus. So I went through a lot of research with those. I ended up picking the carbon copy myself, but I always loved the sound of the Aquapus as well. And funnily enough, I've seen various people comment online since that the original Aquapus, like the version 1 that is so highly regarded and rare, that Mayer uses, for example, among others, the carbon copy actually sounds a little closer to that original than the modern Aquapus reissue. So, I've got to say, the carbon copy is the king of short delays. I use it all the time. The Aquapus is great as well, but I just find it a little bit too obtrusive. So, you know, those very highly regarded Mark 1s of the Aquapus, I've heard on pretty good authority that they sound pretty much like the carbon copy does. So, long answer to your question, but as an all-in-one pedal, the carbon copy is the one for me. Hope that makes sense. Shane Marquis says, one benefit of quarantine is the clock doesn't matter at the moment. That's correct. I can see where you're coming from there, and I think, yeah, you were the chap who's watching from Australia and it's 2 AM, so yeah, you're a man of your word there. Okay, so let's see what else we got. Milos Stefanovic says, hello, greetings from Belgrade, sorry. Loving the PRS Special, yeah, I totally agree with you. Thanks for coming back. Hello from France, we've got from Astad. Santa Barbara, California, from Cup of Noodles. Good to have you along. Okay, so David Mead is chiming in from Hong Kong, where it's midnight, interestingly enough. Pete, you need to invest in some studio setup to give you and the channel a chance to compete against other strong channels out there. Well, hopefully you've seen some of our other studio content where we've got proper recording set up. These videos are literally just me with my phone, so we may advance these at some point. We used to have a more advanced live sort of technical setup during the earlier days of lockdown, but it just makes more sense for me to do it here by myself. So I appreciate the comment there, David. But hopefully, you know, if you haven't seen it already, check out some of our other studio stuff, which I think does give a lot of other YouTubers a run for their money, at least. Bay Area, California, from Max Goodberg. Good to have you along. Okay. Asri Siddiq, I hope I've pronounced that somewhat correctly. Hello, Jack. May I know what nut material do you prefer on your fixed bridge guitars? That's a tricky one. I honestly don't have a preference. I mean, I've always just known, I guess, bone nuts. I'm not a big fan of metal nuts, so brass nuts and so on. I don't like the ring that they add, so I'm just going to say bone nuts because that's all I really know. You know, or whatever comes stock on Gibson guitars, basically, is what my answer would be. It's not a great answer there, but that's all I know. Okay, Frank Voits says, hi everyone, best HH Strat under £1,000. I'm going to take that as red maple fingerboard. You're probably looking at stuff like, I've talked before about the Charvel, the Pro Mod series that we carry. They do HH models. They sound great, and they've got roasted maple necks, they've got HH fingerboards, pickups even, roasted maple necks, HH pickups. Pretty much everything you're asking for, and the quality is really good for that particular price point that you're talking about. Other than that, you may be looking at some Japanese Fenders, but no specific models spring to mind. So I'd look at Charvel if you haven't already. Okay, where are we? It's a Cello says, if Gibson reissued any vintage amplifier, which one would you pick and why? I'm afraid to say I'm not familiar with any old Gibson amps, really. The closest thing that I know of is, I believe, the Dr. Z Jetta, which was their recent addition to the line that's slightly more affordable, little combo and head. Great amp. That had the same output tubes in it as certain old Gibson and Ampeg combos used in the 60s. So that's the kind of the closest thing that I know to the sounds of Gibson amps is that Dr. Z, which is only a loose connection there. So, you know, I like the sound of that amp very much though, so I'd imagine I'd plug into some Gibson amps and I'd really enjoy them, but I just haven't had that particular experience that you ask about, I'm afraid. Okay. Valdas says, PRS Vela, what are your personal impressions on that guitar? They're really, really good. I can't remember the last time I actually played a Vela. I think it was one of the S2 guitars that we use. They're the ones with the funky pickups, aren't they? They're kind of a little bit more of a classic take for a PRS, so it's maybe not the thing that they're best known for. You know, it's kind of veering more into Gibson territory. But I don't think I've ever played a PRS model I've thought, ooh, I really don't like that. At least not in recent memory. So the Vela, I'm sure, is a great, great instrument. Once again, I don't have a strong impression to give you, I'm afraid, but you've piqued my interest. I'm going to check out Vela when this video is done. I'm going to see what we've got and put my hands on one. Milos says, I beg of you, get that PRS for yourself. If only, my friend. You know, I do definitely see one of these being in my future, but when that might be, I mean, PRS, if you're watching for any reason, anyone from PRS or anyone with any link to PRS, just make these a standard model, because they're so incredible. They're literally one of the top 3 PRS guitars I've ever played. Just standardize it, and you know, I'm sure you wouldn't have any trouble selling any more. So please just make it a standard guitar. Okay, so Astarte says, how did you learn guitar? I kindly reserve all those questions for my own YouTube channel when it's about playing and stuff like that, which I'll link in the description below. It's Jack Griffiths Music, and I actually recently posted a Q&A video that covered a lot of those kind of questions. So if you are interested in my playing and how I got started and stuff like that, please check that out. Yeah, fortunately I just posted a Q&A which will address that. But thank you for the question anyway. Rob Brady says, why does the white Les Paul Custom hanging in the demo room downstairs never seem to get much action? It looks fantastic, but I don't think I've ever heard it played. That guitar, actually, I just see that Bevan Scott has answered that question for me. It's John's guitar, his own personal 84 Les Paul Custom. It is a cool guitar. I've used it in a couple of videos. Very different to any other Les Paul I've played. It's kind of, it's just a lot thicker sounding. It sounds, I guess, more traditional, like a 70s and 80s Les Paul would have been. I think the pickups were replaced in it, maybe. There is some coverage of that guitar on the channel. If you check out the video that I did a while ago discussing relics, then that's kind of the last example, I think, where I use that guitar. So you can hear it in a bit of action, but it doesn't get a huge amount of airtime, but that's because it's John's guitar. Okay, Simon Dixon says that pickup is so bell-like. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love this guitar, is that those in-between positions like 2, 3, and 4, where it's utilizing the middle pickup in conjunction with another pickup, sounds incredible. For example, it's a great sounding guitar. I've got loads of questions here, guys. Thank you so much for this. I'm probably not going to get through all of these right away, so bear with me as I go. I'll try and abbreviate my answers a little bit as well. Jacob M says, what are your thoughts on the Silver Sky? We recently posted a video about the Silver Sky, specifically how the maple compares to the rosewood, and I think I outlined a lot of my thoughts about the Silver Sky in that video. I love it. I think it's an amazing guitar. I think it got an unfair trashing when it first came out, but it's kind of come into its own now as a very worthy addition to the model lineup of PRS guitars, especially with the maple board. I personally prefer the maple. I think that's how it should have felt from the off. But yeah, check that video out. It's very recent on the Peach channel, where I discussed a lot about the Silver Sky. Right. Hello, Jack from New York, from G. Tedeschi. Hello to you. Johnny says, do you know if you're going to get any more Epiphone 59 Les Pauls in before Christmas? I honestly don't. I'm sure that maybe some of the sales team have more of an inkling into that than I do. I'd like to think so. They're cool guitars. There was a lot of demand for those. We sold out the dozen or so that we had immediately. So I think there were a few disappointed people, unfortunately. But yeah, they will be coming in soon. I'd like to hope they're coming in before Christmas, but get in contact with the sales team at sales@peachguitars.com, and they'll be able to address that for you, hopefully. Right, where are we? Where are we? G. Tedeschi says, quick question, since you are a Gibson acoustic guitar fan, what is your impression of the Studio J45 and Hummingbird? I haven't played them, I don't think. studio acoustic guitars that I have played, they're often a little bit more stripped back, and I think that's kind of the essence of Gibson guitars anyway, is to have a bit more of a stripped back approach and feel. So I think with Gibson, a lot of the time, it's just a case of you've got to wait for the right one to come along, and that applies all the way up and down the line. I've played really cheap Gibson acoustics, or slightly more affordable Gibson acoustics that are amazing, and it's just because they were just put together right on that day or whatever. There's a magic to certain guitars, and you just have to kind of find them. But equally, I've played really, really nice, expensive Gibson acoustic guitars that sometimes fall short of the mark. So they're inconsistent by their very nature, but that's what makes the good ones the good ones. Shane Marquis says, what would be your pick for a single British style amp? I have the American style amps covered, the Mesa Fillmore and the Cali Tweed, but would love a great British amp. For me, it's going to come down to either the Sir Badger, because that is kind of a do-it-all amp, as is the Dr. Z Maz. It's always between those two for me. The Maz is a little bit more tonally versatile and has the option of reverb. The Badger is thicker sounding, has power scaling, so it's more practical because you can have it at a multitude of different volumes. Check out either of those. There is a comparison video on the Peach Guitars YouTube channel, and hopefully that will help you make a decision. But yeah, either one of those for me. If I could only have one, it's probably going to be the Badger, personally, but that's just me. Burst of Tone says, have you tried the Drybell engine, the Plexi side, which is the overdrive pedal we recently demoed on the channel, into an already crunchy amp, for example a Plexi on 5? I'm looking for an overdrive that will push my crunch sound into higher gain, but fear it would be too compressed. I haven't tried that specifically, but from my own experience, pedals like the Friedman Dirty Shirley, which is another one of those sort of Plexi in a box type pedals, responds really, really well to an amp that's already semi-distorted. So I would imagine that that pedal is versatile enough to be able to span different gain ranges in amps like that. It's a question of the low end, usually. The low end gets too saturated and flubby. But pedals nowadays, where they've got increased headroom and really wide tone shaping capabilities, they kind of cover you for any amp that you're plugged into. So I wouldn't see it being a problem, no. Right, where are we? Bevan Scott says, what amp are you playing that PRS through? Using any pedals today? Right, let me answer that question, because I didn't cover it. I'm playing through two of my favourite overdrive pedals in the shop. You'll have heard them both. I was playing the Ryra 808, which is a tube screamer, and that sounds great for really articulate. This is a great clone of a tube screamer. Really articulate single note stuff. I'm also playing through the JHS Charlie Brown, which is one of my favourite distortion pedals of all time. It sounds like this. Out of tune E string there. And I was also playing with an envelope filter that I alluded to, which is the Keeley Neutrino envelope filter. I love an envelope filter. It's one of the best, most expressive sounding effects, particularly if you're clumsy like myself and you can't really operate wah pedals that well all the time. There's a rhythmic sensibility to using an envelope filter as well. I set it a bit weirdly. let me see if I can fix that a little bit, because it's a little bit gross actually. You get the idea. That's what that was doing. Really expressive kind of a tool. I'm playing through the Morgan JS12 amplifier as well, which is a great little 12-inch speaker-loaded Princeton clone. Great amp. Okay. So, I'm going to try and skim through a few more questions, but I also want to show you another cool piece of gear before this video is through. So, Darren Guitar says, clean amp with pedals for gain or amp overdrive? There's actually a few questions here, but I'm just going to address that one right now. I actually covered this in the Q&A on my own channel, which I referred to earlier. I personally have come to understand that for most situations, an amp that's just approaching breakup point, all clean, with pedals, is the best way to go for a lot of situations, because you get to mold your tone in such a drastic way that you just can't do when an amp is already compressed. It means that you can use effects more easily. You don't have to use effects loops. You can use boosts to actually alter your volume level drastically. So if you're playing live for a solo, it's invaluable because you can just bump your level up. You've got the headroom in the amp to do that when it's clean. With a distorted amp, I think you often get a better distorted tone. It's fuller, it's more rich. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's better for certain voicings. So there's merit to both, and I love using both. But if I had to choose one approach, it's a clean amp with pedals, because like the Friedman pedals I talked about earlier, they sound like a Friedman amp when you plug them into a clean amp. So, you know, you can always distort an amp more, but you can't make it more clean if it's already distorted. So loud, clean amp for me is the way for most things. But ask me again tomorrow and I'll probably give a different answer. Okay. Ramos the Lamos, good name, says, I'm looking for dirty high output Telecaster pickups, neck and bridge. Do you have any suggestions? I know that the, I'm guessing you kind of want to stay away from stacked pickups, so if you want a true telly kind of sound. I know Bare Knuckle does make some really good high output telly pickups, well, all sorts of telly pickups, so check out the Bare Knuckle range. I don't have a particular model I could recommend, but they make great stuff across the board, so they're definitely going to have a telly pickup that suits you. Okay. Monty Kanstin, beg your pardon, says, have you ever put together a parts caster, Jack? I don't think I have. And certainly with the recent passing of Eddie Van Halen, it really got me thinking about that, putting my own guitar together. It's mad when you think that that guitar that Eddie started with in his career, the white and black guitar, was basically a piece of crap because he just bought parts, fairly decent parts, arguably, but he just put parts together of stuff that he had lying around, and it sounded incredible. And that's obviously just because he was an amazing player, and he had an amazing amp as well. So, you know, arguably that guitar plugged into a practice amp or something probably wouldn't have delivered. So the idea of building a parts caster is pretty cool, but I've never done it myself. I've certainly modded guitar, you know, put different pickups in Strats and things like that, but I've never actually put together a parts caster. It'd be an interesting project one day. So yeah, good question. The Juggernaut V2, I think I've read that right. What's your thoughts on stacking overdrives? My Tube Screamer doesn't work well with other drives. I love stacking drive pedals because but it depends on what they are, obviously. If you have a really good foundational overdrive, this is the way I like to think about it. If you've got a clean amp, as I do today, par exemple. Now forgive me because this isn't going to come across very well on a YouTube live phone camera, but if you have a good foundational overdrive that basically sounds like a cranked amp, like the Charlie Brown, that's why I love this pedal so much, the JHS Charlie Brown, which takes the clean sound to this. tube screamer on top of that works really well. Right, so I've got 4 different sounds from stacking there, just from 2 pedals. If you have one overdrive that's fairly mid-scooped or fairly flat, and another like a tube screamer that's got a mid-hump, they kind of flatten out the tone and just sound really full-bodied. If you've got 2 tube screamers together or 2 similarly voiced pedals, it's going to be a mess. Equally, if you have 2 pedals with too much gain, it's going to be a mess. But I love stacking lower gain overdrive pedals like that because the tone is really focused. It doesn't give the best like high gain sound, but it means that you get a really articulate kind of like, it's also kind of like building blocks, like Lego blocks. That's the reason I like it, because you can always just turn a pedal off and knock your gain back a little bit, or if you want to knock your mid-range back a little bit, you just turn off a pedal. You don't have to switch to a totally different sound. So I like the approach of stacking. It doesn't work for everybody, but I do stack pedals a lot. And for me, the best stackable pedal is the Kingtone Dualist. That's why you see me use it all the time, because those two circuits sound amazing together, or with something else like an OCD, Charlie Brown. So as long as they are differently voiced, they're going to work really well. If they are similarly voiced, it's basically just going to butt heads. Think of it like a magnet. If you've got a positive and a negative, they're going to work, but they're going to butt heads if they're the same. That's my little take on that anyway. Hopefully that helps you, and it will help you work your tube screamer into sounding good with other pedals. Okay. Emil says, best pickup combination for HSS with a 250k pot or a 500k pot? Okay, this is a really geeky question, and I appreciate it, and I am going to tackle it. Best pickup combination for HSS, I can only speak for what I have in my HSS guitar, which is a Sir Classic Pro. I went for ML single coil pickups and the SSV in the bridge. I love the Sir pickups. They make loads of HSS guitars, so they know how to make their pickups balanced with one another. Also the Peach Dealer Select Classic Pros that we have here with the MLs and the Thornbucker Plus sound great as well. I'm thinking of putting a Thornbucker Plus in my own guitar. As for the pot value, I think I don't know why I'm sweating so much over this question, because it's a really geeky little tiny detail, but 250k versus 500k in an HSS guitar, man, that's actually stumped me a little bit. I'd go 500, because you can always roll high end off the single coil pickups. You can't add it back onto the humbucker. Okay, there you go. That answers your question. Okay, let me see how far we've got with the questions, because I feel like I'm missing a lot of your questions. You guys are really on it with the questions today, which I appreciate, but I can't keep up. Brian Stern says, what are your 3 favourite PRS guitars and why? And your least favourite and why? I see why you asked that, because I did mention this is one of the best 3 that I've ever played. It's this. It's probably the McCarty 594, the double cut, so the same shape as this, and the Custom 24. Some of the Wood Library Custom 24s that we've had recently, which are kind of different take on the formula. They have roasted maple necks as opposed to mahogany necks. Those would be my top 3, and the one that it's my least favourite, I don't know, I've probably got to say like some of the signature guitars. I was not big into the Tremonti or the DGT personally. I see where they're coming from and I see what they're for. I just don't, it's not my thing. It's not my thing. But yeah, Custom 24, this Special, and the McCarty 594. Those 3 are damn near perfect guitars, and I think maybe one of the reasons I don't own a PRS currently is that I could not pick one of those three. It would be very difficult to actually pick one over the other two, so you know, that's why I don't have a PRS, because I love three equally. So hopefully that answers your question. Where are we? Okay, just below that, more of a statement than a question from Milos. PRS is one of the only companies that I almost always regret getting, since they come up with so many innovations each year. Paul is a madman. I see what you're saying there. Yeah, they're constantly evolving their designs, which is great. And that's also another factor that means it's difficult to actually make a decision on a purchase, because I become so obsessed with one particular model, and then those Wood Library Custom 24s came out with roasted maple necks, and I thought, okay, no, maybe that's the one. So yeah, I see what you mean. It's a statement that I will agree with, but at the same time, all guitars are different. They're always going to be different, and if you find that the guitar you're playing has magic in it, it's got to be the one, isn't it? It doesn't matter if they innovate to something else, because if it's got the magic, it's going to work. So, but I see your point. Okay, what else? What else we got? Dakota Lotus says, "How's it going today?" It's going well, thank you. Hope you're doing well as well. And I just subscribed. Excellent stuff. Okay. Where are we? Where are we? Okay. Lots of questions here, guys. Really appreciate it. Josh Babbitt says, I was between the Tone King Mark II, the hand-wired 64 Deluxe Fender Deluxe Reverb, and the Friedman Dirty Shirley 40, and think the Dirty Shirley is what I'm going to go with. Nice, clean, and overdrive. Well, it was a tough choice. I see where you're coming from with that, and I happen to agree with you on your choice there, because I often prefer Brit voiced amps that clean up well, because they have the capability of being driven as well, and I think they sound better with pedals. So good choice. I would agree with you on that one. CJ says, have you discussed the Epiphone 59 Les Paul? I did earlier on. That was a very popular guitar, and they just sold out, but they are on their way. The next batch is on the way. Sorry. Just trying to keep up with these questions. Scott Allen says, ever played the JHS Bender? Any thoughts? I haven't actually played that, but I'm very curious to play that. And the reason being, it's an interesting story that I'll probably tell another time on my YouTube channel, but I used to have an amazing original tone bender that was courtesy of one of my guitar playing relatives, and that pedal directly inspired, that exact pedal, I believe, inspired the JHS tribute line. I'll tell that story another time on my own channel, so make sure you are subscribed to that, and I'll get into that another time. But yeah, I'd like to play that because I'd like to know how close it gets to the real thing. Jacob M, this is a good question here. What are your thoughts on signature guitars? So obviously, okay, nowadays there's so many signatures out there, and they all come about for different reasons. So you get some guys that like to just slightly tweak an existing design to their specs, and then you get other examples of signatures that I think take on a life of their own and become a model in their own right, regardless of the artist's connection. For example, the Les Paul is a signature guitar, technically. Silver Sky as well, and those are my favourites. The Music Man Lukather, the L3, is another example as well, where I love signature guitars that they're born out of an artist's desire, and it's such a specific desire that it actually deviates from anything that's come before slightly, and it becomes an instrument in its own right. So that's what I like, those examples I just gave. I'm not really a fan of, a guitar that's just got someone's name on it and they've maybe tweaked a couple of things. It's just not my thing. I appreciate there's only so many advancements you can make in the guitar world. The Reverend Gristle Master that I showed you last week, Greg Koch's signature, I think is a great signature because it's totally different. It's a different body to a Telecaster. It's got a different pickup set. It's got a different, being a Reverend as opposed to a Fender or something, it's got a different feeling neck. It's got different woods and so on. So I'm into signature guitars, and I've owned a few that are legitimately different to stock guitars, but I'm not into the kind of so-and-so edition of a Strat or a Tele if it's not radically different. That's just my take. It's different for everyone, but yeah, that's the deal for me. Okay. Okay, I feel I might have missed something here because Will Curitan says, I second the Kemper or Helix question, but I didn't see the first question. So, for me it's Helix because it can do so much from level zero, from ground zero. You can literally build a rig, either a full rig with amp modeling or just effects. It's so easy. The Kemper is amazing, and I think if you're an artist and you've recorded in a studio and you've got an amazing sound in the studio and you want to literally transport that tone to a live situation, the Kemper is perfect because you can do exactly that. You can bottle an exact setup. But it's hard, I feel, to get the Kemper off the ground, just starting from scratch. So for me, it's the Helix. It's easier to use. I think it sounds better 95% of the time. But the Kemper has a lot of good uses as well. But Helix for me. Okay. Right, I appreciate, once again, I'm going to have to skip through a few of these questions because I want to show you something cool. So I'm just going to take one more question and, okay, two more questions. And then we're going to move on to a second piece of cool gear before I end the video. So, Scott Allen says, do you use or care much about buffers? I am obsessed with buffers. Maybe that's a bit strong, but I'm very aware of buffers all the time. I think they're very important, so much so that I'm not using a buffer today and it's annoying me. I've got 3 pedals on the floor and plugged into 1 amp and I'm annoyed I don't have a buffer. I'm a bit nutty about it because I love high frequency content because you can always roll it off. If you don't have a correctly buffered chain, you lose a fundamental part of the guitar tone. So I always have at least 1 buffer when I'm playing, apart from today, which is why I'm sad. But I think they're very important, and if you don't really know that much about buffers, there are great videos on the internet that explain what they do and what they're for and why they're useful. There's also a great reason for not using them, but I don't personally like that approach. I like to have a buffer, at least 1 buffer in the chain, after the overdrive pedals, before the modulations and the delays, and 1 right at the end as well, because that just retains loads of high end, and I like that. Okay, one more question, then I'm going to show you something else really cool. I think I just saw another good question here. Shane Marquis says, what camp does the Friedman BE50 fall into, American or British? Now that is a good question because the BE50 Deluxe, if I'm remembering correctly, it has the Brown Eye channel, the BE channel, and the HBE channel, but it also has the Buxom Betty clean channel. If you're not familiar with Friedman amps, then all those words I just used will be very confusing and potentially quite funny, but that's legitimately what they're called. So because it's got the Buxom Betty clean channel, which is an American voiced clean, it is kind of a hybrid, but it's got 2 plexi sounding channels and it's got EL34s in the power section, so to me that is a Brit voiced amp with the add-on of an American voiced clean channel. Hopefully that makes sense. That's my answer. Now, I'm going to put this gorgeous guitar away, and I implore anybody who's been considering a PRS guitar to go to the website, take a look at this, listen to the clips that are out there of these specials, and just take a moment to appreciate how amazing these are and the fact that these are limited. I'm very unsure about when I'm ever going to see one of these again, which is a bit of a shame. So, you know, if you're interested, act fast, because they're not going to stick around. So that's that. Now, there's one more thing I want to show you, which you will have seen recently anyway. It's this thing. So let me play a bit. I haven't tuned it, so it's not going to be in tune, but we're going to play anyway. Okay, it is out of tune, so I'm going to tune it quickly. And while I'm doing that, I want to just draw attention to this great guitar again, because there was a video went out, maybe yesterday it was, discussing this amazing guitar, which, if you haven't seen it, this is part of Fender's private collection. This is the HAR 1954 Strat, and it's a very cool story with this guitar. It's currently owned, the original is currently owned by Joe Bonamassa. So there's been a lot of talk about this guitar, and we wanted to make a video just to highlight how cool we think it is. But aside from all that connection, it's one of the best sounding Strats that I've ever heard. It's a 54, it might be 55, don't recall exactly. And they just sound it sounds different to any other Strat that's in this room that I've played. It's got a really comfortable neck. It's like a 54 profile, but it's a slight V. I'm not going to delve too much into the specs, because I've talked about that in the video, which you may have only seen yesterday, so I'm not going to bore you twice, but it just sounds so cool. And I had the 808 on there. It's got a kind of bubble and a life and a solidity to the tone that I've never heard from another Strat. Particularly on the bridge, it sounds almost like a telly in some cases. And it really rings out like a bell, which a lot of Strats just don't do. So, you know, it is an expensive guitar. It's very specific and a niche kind of guitar. But just as an instrument, I love it, and I can't get enough of it. So, you know, I'm sure someone will end up buying this and will treat it as a collector's piece, but I kind of think it's a bit of a shame in a way, because it is just such a good guitar. And I obviously can see that no one would go out and gig with this, because that would be mad, but it is just a great sounding instrument. And I like the fact that you have the little fight to get the in-between sounds, because it's a three-way switch. Where is it? There it is. Turned the envelope filter on there, but there was nowhere near enough signal coming out of this guitar as there was that PRS, so it just sounded like a blanket. But I just saw a comment, Scott Allen, for the life of me, I don't understand why the three-way switch was not changed. Practically, yes, I see your point, but obviously this guitar is a dead-on recreation of the original, which didn't have that. And in the video on this guitar, I talked about that. I actually really like it, because it just gives you three solid sounds. This feels like a real old school manual transmission. I'm being really, you know, overly over the top with the terms I'm using here to describe a pickup selector switch, but it feels like a manual transmission, just nice and solid gear changes, and I love the tone of each of these three pickups. And with those tones, I often don't find I'd even want the in-between sounds. That sounds like I'm making excuses for Fender being lazy and not putting in a 5-way switch, but I actually think it fits the vibe of the guitar, and I personally really like it. It's different, and it ties in with the whole thing that makes this special. So I do concede your point. It's impractical, but it's cool. And that is basically guitar in a nutshell. It's impractical, but it's cool. That's another live Q&A for this week, guys. Thank you very much for joining. I appreciate it. It's been a good one this week. I look forward to joining you once again next Wednesday as well. So if you're around, if it's 2 a.m. in Australia or 9 a.m. in California, if you're around, I appreciate if you want to tune in. Have yourselves a great week and weekend. Take care, guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.